Please, don't let me die. I'm still breathing. I have heard comrades cry like that when bullets tore the Afghan sky. I have watched hands reach up, trembling, and then fall forever. But that morning, on the bank of the Snake River, a smaller, crueler sound cut straight through my chest. A Doberman puppy, not yet 4 months old, so thin that each rib showed beneath its wet coat. It had been shoved into a shredded strip of nylon netting, and beneath that net a heavy gray stone was tied tight with a crude rope. Not an accident. Not a mistake. This was a deliberate sentence. It thrashed, tiny claws scraping in the numbing cold, hunting for something to cling to that wasn't there. Its eyes were wide and round, like small coals soaked in water, staring up at the river as if the surface were a closing steel door. Every kick, every pull of the net felt to me like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My heart hammered so hard I thought I could hear each blow like a mallet against bone. Then, that sound. Not a bark, not a groan. A broken, strangled sob, the kind of sound a child might make calling for help in the dark. It tore straight down into whoever heard it. It didn't have the full range of a word, but it had enough to rip through indifference. I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't look away. The sound pulled me as though tied. I froze. For a moment, my mind tried to convince me I was having a hallucination. War memories snapped back, the scenes that once stiffened me. But this was different. This wasn't a matter of strategy or orders. This was a fragile life being taken for sport. I felt small in the face of such cruelty, and at the same time, a cold rage began to rise from somewhere deep. Then another sound shredded that shallow calm. Laughter. Harsh. Hollow. The laughter of people who treat suffering like entertainment. From the far bank, 2 figures stood. Clean clothes, new boots, phones bright in their hands. They watched like an audience, measuring how interesting the torment would be. One said in a flat voice, "Let it go. Sink or swim." The other sneered, the phone vibrating as he filmed. The sight made me want to spit curses. I wanted to run at them, grab their throats, drag them into the river so they could taste what happy felt like. But war teaches restraint. A reckless move can get you killed. I held still, eyes glued to every tiny movement. The puppies' desperate flails, the quick thumbs on their screens. My heart pounded like it would burst, each second stretched like a death knell. They swung the puppy out and let it drop. The little body fell with a dry slap. Ripples spread. The surface closed. Only bubbles remained, pleading bubbles, popping, fading. I watched the net tighten, the stone press down, the eyes darken. Their mocking laughter drifted away, as if seasoning the crime. In that moment of fury, I knew I couldn't stand idle. I remembered every survival lesson. Stay calm. Pick your moment. But sometimes the moment is now. I dove in. The water cut like knives. My fingers went numb as they found the wet net. I tugged, tore, clawed. One hand, the rest of me pounding like a drum. When the net finally gave, when the pup slid into my arms, soaked, shaking, nearly limp, its breath was like a small miracle. I cried. At that instant, I saw it clearly. The world spawns monsters, but it also spawns people who refuse to be silent. If you hear that cry and your chest tightens, do something. Share, speak up, help. Don't let that sound be only an anonymous echo on the water. If you're listening to this story, please don't walk away. What comes next will stay with you, and it might change the way you see the world forever. From across the river, the laughter rang out like shattered glass falling in a cathedral. I turned my head, and they appeared. 2 young men. Their clothes were far too clean to belong to this river, boots still gleaming, untouched by mud. They looked like strangers here, but their smiles betrayed them. They weren't lost. They had come for one purpose: cruelty. One was broad-shouldered, heavy-handed, gripping the pup as though it were a cheap toy. The small body quaked in his grasp, legs thrashing in a hopeless dance. His smile bent upward, twisted, radiating a chill more dreadful than the river itself. I heard the other man call him by name: Caleb. Beside him stood the slighter one, phone clutched tight, lens tracking every movement as if this were some bargain comedy the world needed to see. His laugh was awkward, forced, but he kept filming, shackled by his own cowardice. His name was Jared. Caleb lifted his head. His voice was rough, hollow, like a spent casing striking the ground. "Relax. It just needs to toughen up. Sink or swim. Nature will teach it. This is training. Watch. You'll see. It'll be fun." Jared faltered. His words came small, trembling. "Caleb, this feels wrong." Caleb sneered, eyes fixed forward. "Shut up. You don't get it. This is how I build grit. This is how you make a warrior." He clenched the net tighter. The rasp of nylon grinding into raw flesh scraped my nerves raw. The puppy shrieked, a thin, knife-like cry slicing the air. Caleb laughed, not to share joy, but to proclaim one thing. He reveled in the pain he held in his hand. My breath caught. My fists curled on their own. Rage surged inside me like a black tide. But I stayed still. I knew. The moment had not yet come. On the bank, Caleb raised the pup high, eyes gleaming like a man who had discovered a new game. Jared kept filming, lips trembling, but the phone never wavered. And I realized something bitter. Some commit the crime, and there are those who keep it alive with silence. If you're listening to this, remember, evil doesn't only flow from the hands that strike, but from the mouths that stay shut. Never let yourself be the second kind. I had stood too long on the bank of the Snake River. From the moment Caleb laughed, from the instant Jared lifted his phone like a cowardly spectator, I knew this wasn't the first time the world had let cruelty take the throne. And inside me, an old fracture began to bleed again. My name is Daniel Cross. I am 48 years old. To most, I'm just a recluse with one arm missing, living alone in a wooden cabin tucked into the mountains of Idaho. But before the silence of the forest, before the porch dripping with dawn mist, I was a Marine sergeant. I was a man who pressed one boot after another through the dust-choked streets of Kandahar. I remember that day as if it were pressed into my skin. A morning no different than the others. The Afghan sun still burned red. The dust still hovered like toxic fog. My squad was on patrol. A blast, a flash of white light. When I opened my eyes, what remained was only blood and silence. In an instant, I lost my left arm. I lost far more than that. The young faces, my brothers who laughed with me, who swore oaths beside me, turned into ashes at my feet. From that day forward, night was no longer night. It became a vault filled with screams, with hearts that stopped beating, with eyes frozen open, asking me, "Why are you alive when I am not?" I never had an answer. I still don't. I came back to America with a dangling sleeve where my arm had been. The city noise, the neon signs, the crowded bars. None of it belonged to me anymore. I no longer belonged to that rhythm. I drove until the roads narrowed and coiled, until they carried me into the Idaho mountains. There, I built a small wooden cabin, back pressed to the pines, face turned toward the Snake River. Some called it running. Maybe it was. But for me, it was the only salvation left. Every morning, I rise before the sun. I brew coffee in my father's old percolator. The drip is the only song I need. I sit on the porch, mug in my right hand, my empty sleeve swaying like a silent period. In front of me, the snake rolls green and deep, catching the light of dawn. I call it my church. No roof, no bricks, just sky, trees, and water. I don't pray anymore, but I trust in nature's repetition. The tap of the woodpecker, the swoop of an eagle, the murmur of water below the hill. That rhythm kept me alive. Each day is almost the same as the last, and in that sameness, I found a brace against the dark. Some say solitude kills a man. For me, it was medicine. After the war, I needed silence. I needed slow breaths. I needed distance to heal. And I thought I had learned to live with it. Until this morning. I was out on my patrol. That's what I call it. Because a soldier's instincts never die. Every step along the river had its purpose. I listened. I scanned. I measured the ground softened by night rain. I knew every root that rose, every bend of the bank, every fern leaning sideways. This was my world. The place I thought I could rest until the end. But life doesn't knock politely. It breaks the door. It doesn't ask. It storms in. And it did that today, when I heard laughter. Not the laughter of children at a lake. Not the warm laughter in a tavern. No, this laughter was sharp, like a blade. It carried mockery. It didn't belong to the forest or river. I held my breath. My body moved on its old reflexes, back pressed against pine, ears tuned, eyes sweeping. Every nerve stretched like a drawn bow. I told myself I could ignore it. Just hunters joking. But then another sound slipped inside that laughter. A strangled cry, swallowed, dropped like a stone into the air. I knew it instantly. I had heard it before, in Kandahar, in Fallujah. The sound of a life slipping away, clawing for a hand to pull it back. Back then, I couldn't save them all. But today, when I saw the Doberman pup's eyes, wide and raw in the nylon net, stone dragging it down, I understood one thing. I would never stand idle again. And if you're hearing me now, remember this. Sometimes fate lies one single moment before you. Either you turn away and carry the ghost of it forever, or you step forward and pull life back from the edge. That morning, on the bank of the Snake River, I was no longer the hermit of Idaho. I was Sergeant Daniel Cross once more. And this time, I had a mission. Caleb stood there, his broad hand clamped tight around the dripping nylon net, the gray stone bound to the fragile body inside. Jared still held the phone, his eyes flickering between fear and cowardice. The air along the river was so taut it could snap in two. The Doberman pup trembled, ears pinned flat, a thin rasp spilling out of its throat like shards of glass crushed underfoot. It didn't understand what was happening, but instinct screamed the truth. This wasn't a game. This was death pressing its face against its own. Caleb laughed. The sound rang through the morning mist, more grotesque than any bullet whine I had ever heard on the battlefield. He swung the pup as if it were nothing but a sandbag. "Look, Jared. This little guy has to toughen up. The water will teach him. Sink or swim." Jared chuckled weakly, his voice trembling. "Caleb, this is going too far." "Too far?" Caleb's mouth curled, eyes flashing with disdain. "You're too soft, Jared. This is survival. Either you fight or you drown. You'll see. He'll swim." I clenched my fist until my knuckles cracked. Blood pounded at my temples, my chest straining as if it might explode. Every part of me screamed, "Move!" But the soldier's instinct held me still in the shadow of the trees. I knew one wrong step, and it would all be over. Caleb yanked the knot tight one last time. The dry snap of rope echoed as the stone slammed into the pup's belly, ringing out a cry so raw it froze my spine. I had heard it before, but from young soldiers, choking on their own blood. It was the sound of, "Don't leave me." Caleb threw his head back, laughing, then spun suddenly. In that instant, the pup's eyes locked onto mine, pleading for a miracle. Then his hand snapped upward. The small body arced through the gray sky in a desperate curve. Then, splash! It struck the water. Foam burst white, then sealed over like an iron door. Circles rippled outward, catching what little light there was. I searched, but saw only bubbles, fragile prayers rising and breaking. The little shadow sank, dragged down by stone and cruelty. Caleb slapped his thigh and roared, "Look at it, Jared! It's learning to swim. It'll get stronger." Jared swallowed hard, masking his shaking with a hollow laugh. His eyes refused to meet the river. His voice shrank, strangled. "Caleb, it won't make it. The current's too strong." Caleb snapped his head around, his eyes knife cold. "Let it drown." 4 words dropped into the air like a death knell. I felt my whole body lock. The wind stopped. The forest stilled. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. The world shrank to the pounding of my heart in my chest. I stared at the water. The pup sank deeper, legs thrashing weakly, foam bursting, then fading. Each second it went under, I saw my brothers' faces again. Wide eyes. Panic. Silent pleas. Then nothing. Kandahar. Fallujah. Places I had sworn never to leave anyone behind. I bit down so hard I thought my teeth might crack. My right arm trembled, ready to strike. And when Caleb spat those words, "Let it drown," something inside me snapped. The hermit of Idaho vanished. What remained was Sergeant Daniel Cross. I don't remember how I left the tree line. All I remember is my body moving on its own, feet driving hard into the damp earth, my heart pounding like a marching drum. Caleb's laughter dissolved. The wind died. The river's voice was gone. Only one silent command thudded in my skull. "Don't let it die." My heavy jacket slid off as I tore it away. The wind whipped my face. Mud spat from my boots as I ran flat out. Then, thump, I dove into the river. Water hit me like 1,000 knives. My whole body numbed. The cold wasn't something you breathed. It invaded, squeezed lungs and bone. I lost feeling in my hands. All I heard was the high ringing in my ears. "Don't panic. Control your breath." I opened my eyes. The surface above was a blurred sheet of glass, light stabbing through in silver spears. The current dragged me sideways, pulling me under as if it wanted to swallow me whole. I cut through the water with the one arm I had left, legs kicking, chest tight as burning coal. And then I saw it. A small shadow, dimming at the riverbed. The Doberman was pinned by the stone, its little body flailing like a dying candle. Tiny bubbles spilling from its mouth and vanishing before they could reach the cold skin of the surface. I forced myself deeper. My ears popped. Pressure beat at my head. My spine burned, muscles turning to stone. But I didn't stop. I looked into those wide, glassy eyes, clouded but begging. "Don't leave me." I reached. My fingers found the nylon net. The rope knots had swollen with water, rigid as wire. I hauled. The skin on my hands tore. My blood blurred in the green water. I didn't care. I pulled again. My lungs screamed, "Surface now!" But my heart roared, "Not yet." The dog kept looking at me. No sound, only that pleading gaze. Please save me. I had seen that look in Kandahar, the 19-year-olds staring at me before their chests were stained red. I had sworn then I would never leave anyone behind. I held a silent growl in my throat, one hand on the stone, the other tearing at the net. Each move felt like it was being cut into me. Then I heard it, a ripping, not inside my head, but the nylon tearing. A small gap opened. I shoved my arm through, cradled the pup against my chest. The stone was still heavy, but I forced it free. The little body went slack in my arms. Its head lolled. White foam spilled from its mouth. It was as light as if life had already left it. I refused to accept that. I kicked, thrusting off the riverbed, arms gouging at the water. The surface above was a glass wall that would not come. My eyes flared with stars. My ears rang. Breath ripped from my lungs. My chest burned like coals. Still, I held it tight, pressed it to my ribs as if holding on to my own life. And then, release. I broke the surface, gulping air like a drowning man stealing a second chance. My breath tore, raw, burning, but sweet as anything I'd ever known. I rose, chest heaving. The pup clutched to me. It lay limp, head swinging, eyes sealed shut. No, don't give up, kid, I croaked, water spilling from my mouth and nostrils. You fought. Don't stop now. The current still fought us, twisting me, dragging. My limbs felt like lead. But I swam. I don't know how. I just knew I had to. Dead or alive, it had to come out of that river with me. My knees hit the gravel. I collapsed onto the sand, lungs exploding into hoarse gasps. I crawled, clutching the tiny body, hauling myself free of the water's lip. Then I dropped to my knees, shaking with cold, breath hammering like a drum. I looked at it. Eyes shut tight, chest not moving. Water dripped from its snout into the sand. My hands trembled. A dread colder than the snake itself sank through me. Maybe I'd been too late. I collapsed to my knees on the cold sand, water dripping from my hair, blurring my eyes with pain and exhaustion. In my arms, the little Doberman lay motionless, its head tilted back, muzzle half open, body limp as a broken toy. Its chest was flat. No breath, no sign of life. No, it can't end like this, I muttered hoarsely. My voice shook like a frayed wire about to snap. I lay it on its side, trembling hands pressing against the tiny chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. I pushed hard, then bent down, mouth over its muzzle. I breathed 2 soft puffs, careful as though I were guarding a candle about to go out. Nothing, I repeated. Compressions. Breath. Water sputtered from its nose, soaking into the sand. Still no movement. Time froze. Each second cut deeper into me like a blade. Don't give up, kid. You fought in that river. Don't surrender now. I worked and whispered like a prayer. Blood from my torn hands seeped into its wet fur, mixing with river water. I didn't care. I only knew to keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe. My chest felt ready to burst. My lungs burned, but my hands never stopped. My head spun, ears ringing. And for a heartbeat, memory stormed back. My wife's face in the hospital bed, her cold hand slipping from mine. I had been powerless then. I hadn't saved her. But now, I would not let it happen again. Never again. Never. I roared into the storm of despair, pressing harder, faster. And then, a sound. Cook! I froze, doubting my own ears. A tiny gasp, then a twitch. A rush of water spilled from its mouth, followed by a faint rasp. I leaned closer, eyes wide, heart hammering to escape my chest. Yes, breathe, kid, breathe. It shuddered. A hoarse cough tore out, weak but perfect. The little chest rose. Then again, and a third time. I broke into tears, sobs mingling with rain and sweat. I pulled it against me, listening to the fragile, undeniable rhythm of breath. That's it. You came back. You're a true fighter. I laughed, broken and raw, the sound cracking into a sob. Warmth seeped from its tiny chest into mine, fragile, but enough to burn away years of shadow. Across the river, Jared lowered his phone, face drained white. Caleb stood frozen, grin gone, eyes wide in disbelief. I stared back, the gaze of a man who had wrestled life from the hands of death. In my eyes, they saw something they would never understand. The worth of a single life. But I no longer cared about them. My whole world was wrapped in the trembling body pressed against my chest. I pulled my coat around it, shielding what little warmth it had left. It wheezed, brown eyes fluttering open, then closing, as if to whisper, "Thank you." I bent low, lips to its ear, and whispered, "From now on, no one leaves you behind. I promise." That night, the fire in the cabin hearth crackled, casting golden light across the dark wood walls. I sat back in my chair, eyes fixed on the small basket beside me, where the Doberman pup, now I called him Night, was sleeping. Curled in a thick blanket, his breaths were still weak but steady, each rise and fall like a fragile thread tying him to life. I reached out, brushing his back with my hand. I felt the jut of ribs, sharp beneath damp fur, and it cut straight through me. But beneath the wounds, I sensed something stronger than death itself. Will. Night had fought to survive, and in that fight, he had pulled me out of a pit I once thought no one could drag me from. I remember naming him. I didn't choose the name just to call him. I chose it as a declaration. You are a fighter. A small knight, frail but unbroken. And I needed that name to remind myself, too, that a man who had long been buried in the shadows of war could rise again. Day by day, I cared for him, as if tending my own scar. I warmed milk, patient enough to drip it slowly into his mouth. I cleaned his wounds, dried his matted fur, and held him close to share what little warmth I had. At night, when the forest wind howled and he trembled in his sleep, I bent to his ear and whispered, "It's all right, Night. You're safe now. No one will ever throw you into the water again." And deep down, I knew those words weren't just for him. They were for me. I had lived in nightmares too, waking in the dark to echoes of bombs that only existed in my head. I had shaken, feeling chained to an invisible stone, pulling me into the river of memory. Night was only a puppy, but he understood despair better than most. One early spring morning, I walked him to a small park near town. Children ran, balloons floated bright against the sky, and laughter rang out like bells. I feared Night would panic, that he would tremble the way he had those first nights. But he didn't. He stood still, head raised, ears alert, tail flicking gently. Then a little girl stepped forward, hand trembling as she reached. I held my breath, chest tightening, but Night didn't flinch. He let her hand touch his head. I froze. In that moment, Night, the pup who had once trembled at death, chose to forgive humanity, and in his gaze I saw a message. It was time for me to forgive myself. From that day, Knight was no longer just a survivor. He was my heartbeat. Each morning, he walked with me along the Snake River, once a place of hell. Now, with every step, every breath, he turned it into a testimony of rebirth. At night, he curled by the fire, his steady breathing lulling me to sleep. I never thought a man like me, missing an arm, missing faith, could find peace in the breath of a pup. One day, my old neighbor stopped by. He looked at Knight for a long time and said, "You're a lucky man." This dog's eyes, they've seen both hell and heaven. I stroked Knight's head and smiled. No, he's the lucky one, and so am I, because we found each other. Knight wasn't just saved, he saved me, and now I want to ask you, the one listening, have you ever saved a small life? Maybe a puppy, a kitten, or a baby bird fallen from its nest. If you have, you know, when you rescue them, they are rescuing your heart too. Share your story in the comments. Every act, no matter how small, can be a spark that warms an entire world. And maybe your story will inspire someone out there to stop, reach out, and save a soul hanging at the edge of despair. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because who knows, through you, a pup like Knight may find his second chance to breathe, to live, and to love.